Hello, you. You're an average Australian citizen. You're 38-ish, married, have 1.5 kids or so, own a home with 3 bedrooms, and you're a woman. Later this year, every Australian enrolled to vote, including you, will be required to participate in a referendum. In it, you'll be presented with the following statement. A proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve of this proposed alteration? Your job is simply to write yes or no, pop the piece of paper in a box, and go home.
But not quite. There is so much more to it than the simple act of filling out the ballot paper. What are you voting for? How does your vote count? So let's have a proper look.
If it feels like it's been a while since we've had a referendum, you're not alone. The Australian Electoral Commission thinks so as well. For a lot of young Australians, the word referendum evokes memories of history classes about that, historic 1967 referendum, which resulted in a landslide yes. Turns out we've had 44 referendums in Australia since Federation in 1901, with the last one in 1999. And that's nearly 25 years ago now, and the closest thing we've ever had to a good old-fashioned referendum was in 2017 with the marriage equality plebiscite, which was different because they used a word other than referendum.
Most of the referendums we do have are at a state level, and most of those are about daylight savings time, which no one seems to want if they don't have it already.
In the lead up to that referendum, there was near hysterical debate about faded curtains, disgruntled cows, and chooks that wouldn't lay eggs.
In fact, West Australians have already voted against it 4 times in 45 years. They just love a good referendum.
And speaking of, there hasn't actually been a successful referendum since 1977. You see, we've had nearly 50 years of failures of wonderfully interesting things like the interchange of powers, the terms of senators, the rights and freedoms, the local government inclusion,
some really exciting stuff in there. Hey. Ooh.
So, for enrolled voters between the age of 18 and 41 who have never really done this sort of thing before, let's have a look at how a national referendum actually works.
For a referendum to succeed, a law must first pass both houses of Parliament. Makes sense so far. Then the proposed change is given to the public, and at least half of our votes must approve of the change for it to go through. This of course seems to make sense, however it isn't enough to carry the entire change through. 5 previous referendums garnered over 50% of votes and did not pass, with one in 1977 getting over 60% approval, and yet nothing happened. This is because none of these referendums received a majority in more than 3 states.
That's right, the outcome from the states, not including the territories, determines success. The territories, therefore, don't really get an equal say in the final result.
This system might sound a little archaic in the 21st century, and it kinda is. It really sucks that the votes of nearly 700,000 people won't help the secondary measure of success, even though the ACT is on track to overtake a state such as Tasmania in population. And let's not forget the over 80,000 First Nations people that will also be overlooked in this stage of the process. Unfortunately, this is something that cannot change before the referendum, because it would probably take a referendum to change it.
8 have succeeded. Over 117 years and 44 referendum questions, only 8 have actually gotten through. And each of them required unanimous support from the states, except for the one that was for our song. But let's not get distracted by the successes and the daunting pile of failures. But you see, we actually haven't seen a referendum this century, and a bit has happened since November of 1999. Oh, okay, I see we're doing this now. Righto.
We apologise, especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families.
Arguably, the Voice to Parliament is shaping up to be one of, if not the defining moment of this year. We've had referendums in the past, but this one seems to be quite important. But let's take a look back at that ever-historic 1967 referendum. Although we know it was important, not many people could definitively tell you what changed because of it. Many people today say it was about Aboriginal Australians getting to vote, or some basic democratic right like citizenship.
But no, that is not what the referendum was about. Indigenous Australians had the right to vote in most states since Federation, and federally since 1962. Of course, this was only compulsory by 1984.
Even my history teacher at high school said that it was something to do with the Flora and Fauna Act, which it wasn't. Alright then, what on earth was this massive step forward in Australian civil rights? The referendum was in regards to the abolition of Section 127 from the Constitution, which was headed Aborigines not to be counted in the reckoning population. So, census-y things. And also the deletion of the phrase other than Aborigines in any state from Section 51, which now pertains to making necessary and special laws for people of any race. Despite the overwhelming success of the referendum, garnering over 90% approval, it took about 5 years and a change of government for any change to really kick in. People attribute it to many other things as well, but especially then Prime Minister in 1967, Harold Holt, when he decided to ditch his career in politics for a career in swimming. The actual impact of a referendum is generally hard to measure. The 2017 marriage equality plebiscite saw an uptake in same-sex marriages into the thousands within the year of the bill passing through Parliament. Other than that, there was the riveting judge retirement age referendum in 1977, you had to be there, where the encouraged retirement age of 70 years old for High Court justices was brought in. But even then, 5 federal court judges just said stuff you to the changes and stuck around after 70 anyway. So, big whoop as far as referendums go. If you want to understand the actual effect of the 1967 referendum, you only need to look outside of Old Parliament House in Canberra. The Aboriginal Tent Embassy was established on the lawns of the Federal Parliament building on January 26, 1972, as a way to express the growing frustration at the lack of real progress on land rights and racial discrimination issues. After major reforms and 51 years, the Tent Embassy still stands. The Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Linda Burney, is just one person vocalising the issues facing First Nations Australians to this day.
In fact, Indigenous Australians have been left behind, an almost 9-year gap in life expectancy, a gap in infant mortality, and our young people robbed of their potential, languishing behind bars in a justice system that has let them down. It isn't good enough.
Clearly, there must be something wrong that is overlooked by the members of Parliament that are supposed to be representing these communities. This is why we have the referendum. The introduction of an Indigenous voice to Parliament was a key policy of the Albanese government ahead of the election just 12 months ago. The referendum was confirmed by the end of last year and the question was released in March. Now we're waiting for a final referendum date somewhere between October and December this year. As with any referendum, Australian voters will be presented with 2 options: yes or no. Already we've seen politicians from all over the place voice their hopes and concerns for the referendum. The debate to this point has produced seemingly unshakable forces on either side. However, this isn't too surprising. Indigenous activist Noel Pearson says the purpose of the Voice referendum will continue to get lost.
The fight between progressive and conservative Australians over race and over Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people are the subjects of this fight, but they are not its prime protagonists.
So how are you going to vote? And why should you vote yes or no? Wouldn't you like to know? I mean, really, it sounds like more of a you problem. I'm joking. I'm just not now. I think we're done. We're done for this one. We've covered a lot. I imagine you're tired. I'm tired. So let's just have a break. Brief intermission. We'll pick up again soon. So go have a tea or a Milo, or go pat a dog, have a nap. Oh my gosh, I'd die for a nap. Something, I don't know. Call your mum. Call your mum.